I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. What's up, world? Welcome to this very special edition of I Mix What I Like Live right here on Black Power Media. Again, I'm Jared Ball. Very happy to be your host. Very happy to be back again with you, holding it down for the Remix Morning Show crew, giving you some more of that boom bap breakfast that we all need a little bit of. And I definitely do today. As I have been admittedly a bit more scattered than normal, come slide in here a little bit later than I would normally have been setting up. So definitely need all of that. And I'm very happy to get into what I expect to be another great show. Brother Kaba should be here any moment. We have Sister April Ryan coming on in the next hour to talk with us and extend the conversation she was having down the road at WPFW here in Washington, D.C. About the Howard University protests. And in a few minutes, we're going to be joined by Professor Francis Ryan to talk about something I've been wanting to talk more about on this platform in general, the labor movement, but specifically about what I affectionately always think of, though I have no real right or claim to it, as my father's union, AFSCME. So we're going to get into that in just a minute. But I want to just quickly welcome everybody, including our new member, 40J Blaze. And I love to think about all the ways we could interpret that, but definitely welcome. And welcome again, greetings, grand rising to Shirley, Franny French, Rozelle Bow, all the others jumping in here. Greetings, greetings, greetings. Thank you for joining us. And to those who will see this later, welcome to you as well. And thank you, Ricky. I got to read it like 3 more times, but I already put it in the show notes to add to our discussion for later, the Hood Communist piece on HBCUs and colonialism, which is, of course, the perfect frame for that as well. Lifted up the laptop. Anyway, just came crashing in this morning is really how I feel about the whole setup. So if it looks a little different, that's probably why. But just to raise I think I just raised the laptop up a little bit. That's it. It's a compromise. The question is, it could be also reworded, am I allowed to leave? Or do I want to leave? Do they want me to leave? It depends on the moment. It depends on the moment. So I think everybody thought it was best that I be as comfortable in here as possible for as long as possible, for as often as necessary. Anyway, but listen very quickly, because we have a lot to do, and our first guest is already here, and I don't like to punish people for being prompt even early. But there is one piece to this, and then I would even welcome his thoughts on this, should he have any. But I don't want to impose any of this on anybody, not knowing in advance where they stand on this. So, it's good that I'll bring him up after this so that we can have some at least virtual distance. But, as I continue to look at this issue of Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, oh man, who sent me this? Oh, I don't think I have it. I owe somebody a debt of thanks for sending me the second of these two pieces. But just to set this up very quickly, and this speaks to so many different issues, not only in terms of the relationship of Black people to the economy, but the relationship of commercial Black media to the economy. And I think that when we look at the Atlanta Black Star, if we look at often at their coverage of whether it's buying power or this issue or Black economics, there again, there is a commercial tendency here that creates, I think, shout out to Pink Floyd, momentary lapses of reason. How about that? Uh, so check the headline here. African Americans outpace whites and Hispanics in cryptocurrency investments is a new avenue to Black wealth building opening. Of course, the quick answer should be an easy no. It should even be raised up for some sort of falsely balanced, legitimate question. Um, but what it shows here is with no interpretation, no detail, and no, I think, real analysis. What they say here is after years of being skeptical about Bitcoin, Black Americans are leading the cryptocurrency revolution in 2021. So they're calling it a cryptocurrency revolution. All right. Which is, again, as I will continue to argue, patently absurd. The idea that some new currency or new technology, be it blockchain or anything else, is going to change the relationship, the social or economic relationship that Black or other people have to the economy is on its face patently absurd and historically unsupported by any data or precedence or precedent. But continuing, a recent Harris poll found that 23% of African Americans own cryptocurrency compared to 11% of white Americans and 17% for Hispanics. Now, I would interpret this to mean that those targeted for the most aggressive horrors of capitalism continuously look for and are encouraged to and propagandize towards non-political solutions to their economic condition, and their, whether it's funding through punditry and PR campaigns, Spike Lee's, etc., or Hill Harper and others, and Roland Martin and John Hope Bryant and the others we've been talking about on this platform for a long time and showing as being wildly flawed in their economic analyses. Black people and to a lesser extent so-called brown or so-called Hispanics are being targeted to walk away from political solutions to political problems and are being encouraged towards fantasies. Okay, white Americans with much more resource, much more opportunity, diversification of options, whatever, and with less, I think, propaganda targeting them, or to a lesser extent. But then that's all that they say here. That Black people are just increasingly engaging in cryptocurrency, uh, and that this is somehow supposed to be a challenge or something that overturns the lack of banking, underbanking, et cetera, and so forth. Then, of course, they go on to explain very quickly what Bitcoin is supposed to be, and blockchain technology is supposed to be decentralized currency. Unlike the Federal Reserve printed dollars, Bitcoins and others are crypto, aren't tied to any federal bank. And again, this is proposed as a positive, given the justifiable criticism and issues with the federal government in the United States and banking and economics, et cetera, broadly speaking. But to suggest that engaging in private, undocumented, anonymous digital currency is without any federal protection, without any recourse, and then, as I'm going to get to in just a quick minute, other issues as this is a collective a solution to a collective problem, is nonsense. And then, of course, they encourage you to go to very corporate and very white-owned platforms to buy your crypto. So just okay. So that's just one of the examples. Then, but the real story here is this one. And this is the one I just wanted to show, because this is the point that I, and I guess a few others are trying to make when this issue comes up. Bitcoin is largely controlled by a small group of investors and miners, study finds. Shockingly, lo and behold, as we've been pointing out repeatedly here, Bitcoin is already owned, the mining mechanisms, which require a lot of money and time and resources, already being dominated by a handful of mostly non-Black people. And as it says here, it's already, Bitcoin and other popular cryptocurrencies are more easily obtainable than ever, but that hasn't changed the fact that a small percentage of users still control the majority of the market. According to a new study from the National Bureau of Economic Research and via Bloomberg, the top 10,000 individual Bitcoin investors control roughly 1/3 of the cryptocurrency in circulation. This sounds a lot like stocks. This sounds a lot like wealth. This sounds a lot like land. This sounds a lot like housing. This sounds a lot like everything in a capitalist economy. The social relationships are not changed just because a new currency and a technology are thrown into the mix. What they discovered is at the end of the year, the top 10,000 individual owners controlled about 8.5 million Bitcoins, while the top groups oversaw closer to 5.5 million Bitcoins. Digging deeper, the NBER found that the top 1,000 individual investors accounted for about 3 million of the 8.5 million Bitcoins controlled by the top 10,000 investors. Again, it sounds a lot, should sound a lot very familiar. What's more, the researchers note that the measurement of concentration is most likely an understatement, since they can't rule out that some of the largest addresses are controlled by the same entity. Again, this idea that anonymity and blockchain is supposed to be a freeing force and a leveling of the playing field is allowing for what is likely a higher concentration of control that can go with greater degrees of anonymity. And this is especially true of early Bitcoins, many of which are suspected to be held by the cryptocurrency's mysterious creator, Satoshi Nakamoto, who people still apparently don't know who this person is. NBER found that the top 10% of mining operations control 90% of the Bitcoin mining capacity. What's more, just 0.1% of miners, about 50 operations, are responsible for half of all mining output. These observations led NBER to conclude that despite the attention Bitcoin has received over the past few years, the ecosystem is still dominated by a concentration of key players, making the ecosystem susceptible to systemic risk like a 51% attack, where a group of miners could take control of the majority of the network. So I'm going to add, of course, this clip and video to our ongoing library, including a playlist of the cryptocurrency mythology, which we are quickly increasing, so that we can go back and forth and add in et cetera and so forth. But the point is that this nonsense about we can now jump into some new technology and currency and somehow overturn inequality is just absent any logic. Okay. All right. Brother Kaba is here. Professor Ryan is here. So let's take a quick shift and come right back and get into this discussion of what I think is a more legit response to economic inequality, not new technology, not new currencies, but organized labor. All right, back in just a quick second here, and I mix what I like. I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. Brother Kaba, good morning. Welcome back. Good to see you again.
Good morning. Good morning. Good to see you.
I'm glad you are here. We got a lot to get into this morning.
Me too. Better seen than viewed, as they say.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Um, by the
Good
way,
morning, everybody. Too, by the way.
yes, good morning, man. I feel a little rushed. My bad for that. But just real quick, how did your show go this week, and what happened on it, and do you know what's coming next week?
Yeah, we talked a little bit about the children's vaccine,
Mm-hmm.
and then this week we're going to be talking to some more folks who have an alternative view of the COVID situation in general. So it ought to be interesting. We have one person online who's a scientist, and then we have another person that may be there. I'm not sure. He's still working on it. So it's a follow up to the last one we did, the first one that we did. So we're going to be talking about that. So,
All
but
right.
last week's show was very interesting. Just talking about the children's vaccine and the push for it and things. So yeah,
There is certainly a push. Anyway, so people should check that out. They can get the archives if they don't check it live on Monday afternoons at wpfwfm.org. And shout out again to Sister Katia Stitt. And yeah, anyway. But listen, so just very quickly, as I said, growing up, it was always in the background. The labor struggle was big in my household, big in my in both sides of my family, and in particular, the union. In addition to the Coalition of Black Trade Unionists, which my father was a co-founder of, was AFSCME. And one of the largest, if not the largest, union in the CIO, right? Is it? I'll have to get all that straight with our next guest, who's written a book titled AFSCME's Philadelphia Story: Municipal Workers and Urban Power in the 20th Century. He is Professor Francis Ryan, who teaches at Rutgers University School of Management and Labor Relations in New Brunswick, and who I saw on with Eugene Puryear and Rania Kalik at Breakthrough News. And I reached out to their producer, shout out to Nicole, and said, please put me in touch, because I definitely want to interview him myself. And so we are going to do that now. So good morning, Professor Ryan. Thank you for your patience, and thank you for joining us.
Hey, good morning. It's so good to be here. And I just want to say hi to everyone out there listening as well. And if there's any questions, I'm really excited about the conversation.
Well, let's start with just some of the basics, because I do want to talk more broadly speaking about the current state of the labor movement and labor organization, etc. But starting with the full title of the American Federation of State, County, Municipal Employees Union. I think I always struggle to remember that for some reason. Talk about AFSCME, what it is, and then why its Philadelphia story is so important. Let's at least start there.
Yeah. Well, like you, Dr. Ball, my story with this begins at the dinner table, really begins in a small row home in Philadelphia. My grandfather was a member of AFSCME in Philadelphia. He was a mechanic. He worked on police cars and fire engines, and was active in his union. And I got to tell you, the neighborhood we were from in Philadelphia is called Kensington. And Kensington was really a white working class neighborhood, very industrial, and had a long tradition of racism there as well. And I remember in 1983, I was watching a documentary with my grandfather about the March on Washington. And he told me that he had been involved with his union in helping to organize for that. And later I found out that he'd been involved with some marches in Florida. And I asked my grandmom about this, and she said that, it was really with the union that he was aware of the historical struggles, and it was really with the union that educated him with this. So I was curious about that, and when I had a chance to really study this, I asked my grandmom about this, and she said to go down to the union and to find out if there's any records there. And a man named Earl Stout was the leader of the union at the time in Philadelphia. And I asked him if there was any records. And he said, yeah. He said there was a lot of records, but he told me that we threw that shit out, is what he told me. And this is the sanitation workers in Philadelphia. And it was it was really depressing to hear that. But what I did is I did oral histories with people. So the people who actually did the work. And I found that really the story of Philadelphia's municipal workers and the role that they played in changing the city and really having some real power in terms of determining who was elected and the kind of policies that affected real people's lives.
I couldn't read the entire book, but thankfully the press has at least your introduction available in a PDF. So I admittedly, and we can come back to other topic areas or some of the particular, but there was this one part that drew my attention in your introduction. And you write here that this study also explores the ways that class solidarity in the highly diversified municipal workplace broke down predominant racial codes to form a basis for interracial unionism in Philadelphia's public sector. Yeah. And you go on to talk a little bit about how I think you were saying that there's sometimes a mythology associated with unions breaking down these racial divides. Mm-hmm. But apparently in this case it did actually occur. So I mean, because you've already mentioned a little bit, and I think anybody who's at all aware of Philadelphia is clear about the racist divides there. Never mind the rest of the country. But in what ways are you saying AFSCME was successful, or unionization more broadly speaking successful in doing that? Mm-hmm. And then what is the state of that? Like, how did that work out?
Yeah.
Or what does your book say about how that worked out?
The foundation of the union was the sanitation department. About 3,000 mm-hmm. workers who move the trash every day in Philadelphia. And Philadelphia took over its trash collection in 1921 and 1922. And this corresponded with a massive migration from the South. So you have the Great Migration happening, and you have thousands of new people coming into the city. Philadelphia's industrial sector is highly racist, and the hiring gate doesn't allow most Black workers to have opportunities. The greatest example is the textile industry, which is 40,000 workers concentrated mostly in Kensington. And out of those 40,000 workers, census data shows from 1920 that 200 Black workers worked in that industry out of 40,000. So where do they work? They work the toughest jobs, the most menial jobs, the lowest paying jobs, and the most dangerous jobs. And collecting trash is really at that level. So this really difficult work, they had 3,000 workers who did this, and it was interracial. You had about 1,500 Black workers, and the rest were Italian and Irish mostly. And just by the nature of the work, it created a sense of breaking down the kinds of barriers that existed in other areas, like in the neighborhoods. And so this itself was the foundation of what made that an interracial union. You could not have a militant union, and it was militant. They were fighting out in the streets, 5-6 day strikes all through the 1930s and 40s, a very militant union. And it was Black and white workers fighting together. So you couldn't really have that union unless you had a truly interracial vision. And some of the early leaders, and I have photos in the book of people like Ernest Jackson, who were early leaders of that union. And it really was the most significant interracial union in the city at that time. along with the Teamsters. The Teamsters also had a tradition of interracial militancy.
You spoke about the unions and them bringing races together. How did that translate outside of the workplace? You mentioned the neighborhood, the Kensington neighborhood. How did that translate to, say, Blacks wanting to move in, say, a place like Kensington?
That is a key question. The answer is that it usually didn't. AFSCME comes out of the AFL, right, the American Federation, which is actually a rather conservative, reactionary union. And so the idea is that you organize the workplace and you get wages and benefits, and the social aspect doesn't really come into play very much. There's a real clear line between the workplace and the community. And so I don't think that there was a whole lot of addressing larger civil rights issues. I wouldn't call AFSCME, even in Philadelphia, truly a civil rights union. We have other unions that did that in other areas, but it was limited to the workplace. And I think it's important to note that in its history.
You also mentioned, just real quick, because I'm from Florida, and so I don't recall, my parents were definitely not into unions. Florida's kind of more repressive in terms of labor, to say the least, to put it mildly. So my father worked for the state, and my mother worked for a phone company for many years. So I don't recall, and I know for a fact that neither one of them were part of unions. So I wasn't, my consciousness of unions didn't exist there until my professional life, when I joined a union. But my question is more about, what do you know about places like Florida or places in the South, the now at will workplaces, right to work states and whatnot, in terms of the states of unions, because you did mention that your grandfather participated down there. What kinds of unions are predominate in areas like that, and then what is the state of unions down there now,
right,
to your knowledge?
Yeah, AFSCME truly was a national organization. They organized throughout the country, and they were strongest in places that had big cities. They were strong in the Midwest. They had branches in Philadelphia and New York and Cincinnati and places like that. And Washington, D.C. had its federal local number one. But they attempted to organize in places like Florida, but usually did not succeed. There were cases where, organizations existed briefly. Florida, its tradition with trade unions is actually quite weak, and it's that way throughout the entire South. And this fits into the really repressive, history of the region that can be traced back to its long legacy with slavery. So trade unions were dealt with very harshly in terms of just physical violence, intimidation, and certainly the police force and the law backed the employers over any kind of workers' rights.
So when you talk about AFSCME not being a civil rights union in the way others were, could you talk about what that means to be one and one? Because again, selfishly, like I grew up with just a lot of the mythology of, individually what my father was supposed to be out in the world doing, and so he, having been involved with the civil rights struggle separately. I think there was overlapping mythologies, and over time, I haven't followed very closely, but it seems that AFSCME is not always taking the most progressive positions politically. So anyway, what is the civil rights union? Why is AFSCME not qualifying for that category?
Now, I want to clarify. There are times in AFSCME's history when it was truly a civil rights union. But I want to say that politically, and back to its founding, it was a very conservative union. It was a union that organized, prison guards. It was one of its foundations, and it reflected the cultural temperament of those workers, right? So they tended to be rather conservative. AFSCME had a left-wing alternative, actually, that was organized in the 30s and the 40s. It was called the State, County, and Municipal Employees, very similar sounding, but they were with the CIO. And their politics were very left. They were a radical union. The leader of that union, Abram Flaxer, was a communist. And they believed that the workplace was one place of struggle that needed to spill over into the streets and address all other social issues, to fight for full social equality across all races, and to address the economic problems of capitalism. Right. So it was a militant union that later became what they called the United Public Workers of America. And during the McCarthy era, they were crushed. They sent leaders to jail. And by they, I said the government, the federal government, really crushed the union. And AFSCME supported that. AFSCME came in and took some of their members and tried to really be kind of the more middle of the road or reactionary force. So AFSCME's history, although the union itself likes to promote its more progressive side, is actually far more complicated. And I think it's important for us as people committed to social justice to acknowledge that history.
So, well, I guess, I mean, I want to ask, where is both AFSCME today and the state of labor unions more broadly speaking, both in terms of their own strength and then their relationship to these struggles, more broadly speaking, for social justice?
Yeah. I want to mention too about AFSCME's history. Like the labor movement itself, it has, it's a complicated history, and it does have a very strong tradition of social justice unionism. And I think Dr. Ball, you mentioned you remember stories of Bill Lucy, with your father being involved with the Coalition of Black Trade Unionists. Bill Lucy, I think, represents that tradition in AFSCME, the tradition that we see in 1968 in Memphis. Certainly with Dr. King in his last campaign supporting almost 2,000 sanitation workers who were on strike there. So there is that impulse, that great tradition that beats within AFSCME's heart. There's no question about that. And AFSCME today is a highly politicized union. Its leadership, arguably, Bill Lucy should have taken over the union in 1981 when Jerry Worf died. He was one of the great leaders. And a lot of people argued that it was really Lucy who should have taken over instead of Jerry McEntee. And so what AFSCME did under McEntee and really under Worf as well is that it was very politicized, and it was very committed to the two-party system. AFSCME has been deeply connected to the Democratic Party going back to the 1960s. And even more so since the 90s. AFSCME was considered in some ways one of the reasons that Bill Clinton got the nomination in 1992, when the early stages of the campaign, it was really AFSCME's money and its membership that went out, knocked on doors, and got Bill Clinton into the
and sorry to interrupt, but one of the reasons why I remember that so vividly is because I did go to this would have been the 30th anniversary of the March on Washington, and there were strong AFSCME and other labor contingents there trying to remind Clinton that the original March on Washington was about jobs and justice, and that his plans for NAFTA were destroying all the promises he had made to working people. I do remember. Anyway,
absolutely.
Sorry,
I mean, in the 90s too, AFSCME was a big backer of the crime bill that Bill Clinton signed too. Again, representing thousands of prison personnel. AFSCME has two sides, two traditions here that needs to balance, and how it goes with that in the future will make a difference in this country. They have 1.5 million members, and I certainly hope that, and I'm not a member of AFSCME, but I really do hope that its leadership and its rank and file understand that it has to take a choice of being a reactionary union or to be a union that is truly representing the traditions of social justice that it has in its heart, but doesn't always realize in its policies.
I was going to ask you about that. You said you're not a member because in admittedly my own again personal struggles came to learn that here in Maryland, if I understand, and I don't know this, I need to really learn more about this, the details, but in Maryland, apparently state faculty cannot unionize as part of some already collectively bargained agreement somewhere. So we're forbidden as faculty from unionizing, which seems to fly in the face of everything that, well, just everything, but even the title of AFSCME, I would think that, why wouldn't I as a state employee be able to or benefit from being in a union, but we can't. So anyway, when you said, anyway, I don't really have a question or anything you would.
I mean, the thing with that is that, public workers are not covered by federal labor law, like the Wagner Act that guarantees the right to organize. So they're not covered by that. And therefore, it's like a tapestry of policies. Every state seems to have its own policy. Florida has its own policy. Massachusetts has its own policy, all the different states. So there's not one uniform law that oversees. So I'm not surprised to hear that, I mean, in New Jersey, I am a member of the AFT, and I'm glad of that. I know the difference between being in a union and not being in a union. And I would never not want to be in a union again. Just the basic voice that we have on the job, and also the economic benefits. But with all I've learned, I also want to make sure that my union is a social union, a union that does address those issues, and I'm proud that it does. It helps lead marches for making sure that local schools that are not part of the system that I work in have their needs met, have things like school nurses in the program, and making sure that they have clean schools, and in terms of really important basic issues. We go into the streets and we march that, and I'm proud of our leadership.
What about
yeah, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
What you mentioned, the states, and I live here in DC now and have for some time, and I know that there are unions here. What are the states of unions in DC? Because DC is technically not a state.
Exactly.
So how does that differ from actual states in the district here?
Well, most of the workers in DC, I mean, DC has as a large number of government employees, right? I mean, it's the national capital. So, the workers who are working in other industries do have the federal coverage of joining a union. But AFSCME organized a specific local one that represent federal workers. And they were quite militant in the late 60s and 70s, and went on strike a few times as well, representing sanitation workers, mostly, and hospital employees. So, the thing to remember is that even though the laws don't necessarily open up the door for organizing, it doesn't mean that public workers around the country, even in more repressive states, have not taken militant action. In Alabama, in the early 50s, there were Black sanitation workers who organized very militant strikes, and a lot of them had been miners and had a tradition of militancy that came to play in the public sector as well. So, again, 1968 in Memphis, those sanitation workers did not have the legal right to strike. They did so anyway. So they brought that militancy into play. And I think we're starting to see a little bit of that today as well, with the 100,000 workers over the past month that have been on strike, and even more who may be going out in the coming month.
Well, I mean, you mentioned something that I wanted to, that obviously relates to that, but just in passing, a moment ago, you mentioned you understand the benefits of being in a union versus not being in a union. Could we sort of extend that historically in this country, what that has meant? Because I don't know that I think there of the many versions of the many histories that are suppressed in this country, the labor struggle is among them.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure many people are aware of what the world, as bad as it is now, would look like had there not been a labor struggle. And so could you talk a little bit about the benefits of being in a union today versus not? And then maybe, like I said, sort of extend that a little bit historically in this country. What has it meant to be in and out of labor unions?
Well, back in 1946, there was a really significant strike wave. And the numbers speaks to the power that workers had at the time. 5 million workers were out on strike in 1945 and 46. 5 million. And it's such a wide range of industries. Over 30% of American workers were unionized at that time. And I mean, for me, I know the difference because I've been in workplace situations where management will literally change the rules in front of you. They will literally change that, like they control everything. And you can say that, well, there's something that you said before, and they said, that's not something that they're willing to negotiate now, right? So having a union allows there to be some very specific rules, and it gives you a voice in being able to have some level of protection and say. And to me, that's a measure of dignity right there. The other measure of dignity, of course, is how much money you make. Being able to provide for your family and yourself, to be able to let's say you have an event in your life, like let's say you're getting married or something, or let's say you have a new child. There's no dignity in being, fearful of not being able to provide. And it is that issue of fear that I think comes into play. And, Franklin Roosevelt says that when he was inaugurated in 1933, this issue of fear that the nation is afraid. And we have to overcome that. We can't be a democracy and be afraid, right? And I think that what trade unions have done over the years when they've been successful is that they have given people that sense of hope in the future and being able to provide for the basics and then some, right? The idea of having a vacation or being able to be more than just a worker, to be someone who's a full citizen, to be able to volunteer as a baseball coach or volunteering with your daughter's cheerleading group or something like that. Like there needs to be some kind of a full human involved, and I think that's what the labor movement at its best has done.
Within the last, like a couple of years ago now, this is not nearly as drastic as I know what you're talking about, but I did have a mandate written by a previous senior administrator, literally rewritten so that I could be seen as out of compliance in my face as I sat there saying to the person, "You're doing what you're doing." And the response from across the desk was kind of like you said, it's like, I mean, it was one of the most gangster things I've ever seen in my career. I mean, it was wild, and it was literally nothing. I mean, well, not literally nothing. I mean, I could have, there was nothing I could appropriately do to prevent that. It was wild. And we're not able to unionize as faculties, which was right at the top of my head as that was happening. I was like, this is why. I was like,
I want to dovetail. I want to dovetail on that too. And you can answer this also, Francis, include this in your answer. Yes. But I want to dovetail on that because when I was in the military, I had the same type of situation with a supervisor with who would just try me all the time and write me up for the smallest. If I had one hair that wasn't shaved, this dude would write me up. I mean, that kind. And so, like Jared, there were some alternative things I could have done. That I wanted to do for sure that I obviously could not do, but it just reminded me of the fact that people in the military obviously aren't able to unionize either.
Yeah, and the military.
And I'm sorry to cut you off, but technically, as you're saying that, I'm reminded, and I hope there is a statute of limitations, because when I was at that 30th anniversary of the March on Washington, I was still in the military, and technically you're not allowed to be there. Not only can you not unionize, you can't even actively participate in some sort of protest like that. You're not even supposed to be there. so to support other people's unionization efforts. So
well,
you know,
you were
anyway,
there hypothetically. You were there in spirit.
hypothetically, I
That's
was
what you
there in
mean. You're
spirit, of
you're not
course.
meaning literally that you were there.
No,
You were there.
not
Right.
literally, but
Right.
never. Right. But it's wild. Yeah. Anyway. Yeah.
And you know, they want to impose, management wants to impose that level of discipline and fear in the workplace, right? It's like a military model that everyone has to follow in line, and you step out of line and you're done, right? And the thing that I think comes through with that is, you know, when you're faced with that, it's a one-on-one kind of thing, and it's you against the whole system. Whereas what a union is that it's that radical act of collective action. And that's the most radical thing that we have now that we can do. We have to see ourselves as a collective, not just individuals. You know, our society, capitalist society, enforces this narrative that it's the individual that matters, and you can make those choices. And back to your point about the Bitcoin, you know, like if you fail, it's on you, right? And the notion is that that's not the way that things have to be. And a collective response, a community response, is what I think at its best unions can do.
Well, that's what I think. I mean, unions. First of all, yeah. First of all, it was a she, and she did chump me. Like it was a complete. It was Dick Cheney shooting his friend in the face and having him apologize to him. I mean, there was, you know, there was nothing I could do about it. You know, like, I mean, it was a complete. But that's what I've always appreciated about unions, is that they remind, and this is why I understand why they're so threatened and challenged all the time, because they remind everybody that it's working people who collectively produce all this wealth that only a handful get to appreciate, and the benefits from which only a handful get to enjoy. And it's complete nonsense. There is no individual nothing. I've seen some people in the chat have mentioned this. I'm sure you have an eye on at least some of what's going on around the country with strikes. I don't think we've hit the 1940s levels yet, but there seems to be some new energy around strikes and labor. Do you see it that way, or are you less optimistic about what you're saying?
No, I am an optimistic person in general, but it's true. When you look at the numbers, 100,000 people, men and women, were out on strike this past month. 100,000. That's a lot. That's more than, you know, when we go back to when we were all kids. You know, it was 1973 that there was really a last wave that had that level of people out on strike. So in our lifetime, it really is a significant spike here. But compare that to 1946, 5 million people, that's quite a difference. Now, mind you, that's 12 months. But even if we have 12 months to compare, I don't think we're going to get 5 million people out on strike. What's the difference? Well, it has to do with the sheer number of people who were in unions at that time. And the vast number were not in the public sector. The vast number were working as meat packers, or they were working in steel plants. They were working in textile plants, or as miners, right? So you had this incredible industrial force that men and women were working in. And the United States, really, since the 70s, has become more of a service sector economy, and fewer people are union. And if there's going to be a real shift, what we need is organizing. And the most important thing that we need to do is make sure that politicians get behind this, and put forward the Protecting the Right to Organize Act, the PRO Act, which is going to be before Congress very soon. If this goes forward, it will make it more accessible for average workers around the country in every sector to organize. And polls show that a significant majority of American workers, if given the choice right now, would join a union. The union, pro-union sentiment has not been this high since 1965. So I think it's important that we continue talking about this. And I so appreciate the fact that you're putting this on the show.
What do you think is behind that? Because it's this surge now. I tend to think it had a lot to do with the pandemic, and people were kind of shut down. And then they may have seen the ability of the government to actually do more than what they said they were able to do, because people started getting checks. But what are your thoughts on that?
it's a basic thing. I mean, people are pissed off. We've had over almost 2 years of this pandemic, and we have these frontline workers who are out there maintaining our everyday life. And they realize that there's a lot of rhetoric about how essential they are, but when they see how they're treated at work, and when they see what they're paid, they know that that's not true. So I think there's this real sense that they've been pushed too far. Working people have been pushed too far, and this predates the pandemic. But I think that's important, and I do think that our moment is important here. That really, since 2016, I think that certainly, Bernie Sanders' campaign has helped to educate people about traditions of, social justice and the socialist tradition in American history.
Do you think that? I have a very different view of that.
I think we might have the same view on that. I know,
Okay.
I'm familiar with your points, but I think that for young people to hear the term socialism and to see it as a viable option. I mean, for years I've been a socialist, but often didn't say it. It was not something I was open about in a lot of situations.
He didn't say it either, though. That was my point. He wasn't
Bernie?
Bernie wasn't really defending socialism. He kept saying democratic socialism, or
be
like northern, like Scandinavia. And
exactly. No, it's true.
Then,
and he's, I mean, in many ways, his policies are not that much different than Hubert Humphrey's, in 1968. Really not that much different. But because of the conditions, the neoliberal era that we've all come through, what sounds, in 1968, what would have been basically liberalism in 2016 is suddenly seen as something much more radical, and it's a comment on our political times. But I do think that it injected into the discussion this curiosity about other ways of thinking politically, and it hasn't gone far enough. But I do think that when we look back on that decade, that probably is going to be something that people look at.
Let me just ask one other question. There's one other one that I had that I was wondering what you think about. I honestly don't. This wasn't my original idea, and I don't remember where I'm getting it, so I apologize to whoever. But and I don't watch enough contemporary television to know how much has changed. But there was an argument that I heard not too long ago that was saying that one of the problems that we have with a lack of unionization in this country is due to an intentional, I'm maybe adding that word as I would see it that way, removal of discussions of working people and labor from not only news but popular culture. Yeah. And so someone mentioned like that the original Roseanne Barr show was maybe the most recent and last real look at the American, or what they meant white working class, in a popular cultural way. And that was, for the time at least, sort of radical. And I'm wondering if you think, I don't know how much TV you watch, or what if you've seen any studies on this, or if your book even talks about this. But is there a relationship between pop culture representation, or the lack thereof, of working people and this lack of unionization?
Yeah, absolutely. It absolutely is. An example, and this might just be the cultural landscape, but in 1946, and you open up a newspaper, physical newspaper, you could not get away from detailed coverage of these strikes. You had labor beat reporters in all the major cities, sometimes more than one, and it got into the details of the strikes, and it got into the lives of the workers and their leadership as well. What you have now is the capitalist media does not cover workers' struggles. It doesn't have that as an issue. Labor beat reporters have disappeared from most major newspapers. And of course, most major newspapers also have disappeared, or at least been curtailed. So I think what we have now is, and I think this show is a good example of this, that there's other forms of getting information out that need to be done. And it's a critical act for us to talk about this on media like this.
I got a question too around kind of somewhat tangential to that is around sports.
Yeah.
Because when I listen, sometimes I don't listen to it a lot now, but I used to listen to sports talk radio, and it's basically, and I know Dr. Ball's talked about this too, about how its relationship to conservative radio is almost the same thing.
Right.
But I'm always amazed at people's take on athletes, particularly when they exercise their rights to go to another team, or he should be loyal to the team. And I'm like, wow, that's amazing. And some of these people are in unions. Like I've had the discussions with people in the media who are in a union, and they're angry with some sports player for being in a union and exercising his rights. But my main question is basically around people's, I don't know, I guess there's like a wall that people set up between themselves and athletes, as if like they don't deserve to unionize and benefit from unions as well. Mm-hmm. So
yeah, athletes are professional athletes anyway are highly unionized, and I think the struggles that, let's say, professional football players have. I mean, most players don't last very long in that league. And
you're talking about real football. You're not talking about soccer.
Yeah, I'm talking about like
see. Don't let him, Professor Ryan. Don't let him get you caught up in this anti-soccer, anti-football.
He's from Philly. He's from Philly. He knows what real football is. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh yeah.
They have the Philadelphia Union. They have a great team.
Yes, we have a great team, and I'm a sports fan all around, right? So
you mean the Unions of Philadelphia? The Unions of Philadelphia, is that what you're talking about?
The Philadelphia Union, the soccer team. But the point of this is that athletes, certainly the NFL, they don't last that long in that league. Your average utility player is out in 3 years, 3 or 4 years. I forget the exact number, but it's not that long. And very often it's very difficult for them to have insurance afterwards. A lot of places won't cover them. And it's difficult. And the notion is that they make more than your average bus driver during those years, but it doesn't mean that they're going to continue that after the 3 or 4 years that they're in there, right? So it's something that it's important to have, an understanding that the conditions that those athletes have is not that much different than other people who struggle with those kind of life conditions, although slightly different.
Yeah, shout out to Tom Porter and his reference to Curt Flood.
Yes,
absolutely. But listen, Professor Ryan, I again, thank you very much for coming through this morning. I really appreciate the time and the conversation and the work here. AFSCME's Philadelphia Story, Municipal Workers and Urban Power in the 20th Century on Temple University Press. Please get the book, and I'm going to grab it and look forward to finish reading it beyond just the introduction. But I definitely appreciate your time and continued luck, and take care.
Thanks for having me in. It's been a real pleasure having this conversation, and I appreciate everyone listening.
Right on. Appreciate you. All right. Take good care. All right, everybody. Appreciation goes to Professor Ryan. Really dig the work and focus on labor unions and AFSCME in particular. So we'll definitely look to continue engaging his work and reconnect at some point. Brother Bob, shout out today, man. All of our guests have been extremely prompt, even early, as is our next guest. So if we can, let's take this quick transition and then get into a bunch of things. HBCUs, Howard University's protests, the first hip hop conference, a whole bunch of stuff with our next guest. So don't go anywhere. I mix what I like. Black Power Me. I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. All right, everybody. Our next guest, among many other things, is a seasoned cultural arts advocate, published writer, editor, and founder and CEO of Akila Worksongs. She's a communications and marketing executive and with expertise in niche media, community engagement, vision planning, crowdfunding, and so much more. She is a a graduate of Howard University and co-founder of the original hip hop conference. And I would like to say a dear friend of at least me and the show, Sister April Silver. Good morning. Welcome. It is good to see you again. How are you? Greetings, all of that good stuff.
I'm good. I hope you can hear me well. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, good. It's good to be
I can
back.
hear you well.
Good morning, everyone. Good to see your beautiful faces.
Right
morning.
on, right on.
And we're loving the silver too. The
Yes.
literal silver. Yeah.
This is my. It's taken me some years to get used to it, but I wear it proudly now. I call this my wisdom cap. Well,
Absolutely.
Striving to have some wisdom up there on my head.
Yeah.
Well, since
Wonderful.
that is not possible for me, I am trying to enjoy the wisdom stubble. That's what I'm trying to.
It's around your mouthpiece, right? So you speak wisdom. That's how we're going to interpret that.
Hey, there it is.
That's the wisdom coming out. See,
right?
I love it. Finally, we got the right frame on it. Okay. So April, look, I mean, obviously, I got to hear a little bit. I didn't get to hear much, but I kept hearing how great your recent appearance on our my sister station, WPFW,
right.
And definitely and I said, we had been in touch about some other things, but I was like, I gotta ask you to come on to talk about what's going on at Howard. We've been trying to be supportive of what the students are out there trying to support them, and have reached out to invite various forces to come here. And they're still welcome, of course, but always happy to talk with you. So what have you seen happening? What is some of the context of this? What's going on? Why are the students protesting? And what's going on? What's going on?
Yeah. One, thank you for the invitation. I'm glad, we remain connected, around this social justice activist work. I'll do my best to put it in a nutshell. And I'm only going to be repeating what the students have said themselves and what people can find on social media, because I don't speak for the students. So I want to put that on record and be clear. And let me also identify that I am a member of Howard Alumni United, which is a new organization that was formed just a couple of months ago, just in early summer of this year, around the issue of shared governance and the fact that the Board of Trustees at Howard University decided to get rid of and essentially disenfranchise a couple of sectors of the Howard University community, meaning the students, the faculty, and the alumni. Previously, and for a number of decades, there were seats on the board, the top governing body of the university. There were seats for students, faculty, and alumni. And this year, the board decided that they were going to get rid of those positions, that they were advised to do so, that it's on trend in terms of what goes on in higher education, and not having those what it called affiliate positions or affiliate trustee positions on the board. So that's kind of when all hell broke loose for the organization that I'm a part of, this newly formed organization, Howard Alumni United. So that's important backstory to push forward to what the currently enrolled students were experiencing when they got to campus right before the semester started, which was a housing crisis. There were, students arrived at campus with their housing acceptance letter, figuratively speaking, to say that you had a place to live, only to get to campus to find out that they did not. And that there were, and where there were rooms available, there were issues of mold. And there is video and evidence circulating on social media with students having captured the mold in their rooms, and black mold and mushrooms and all of these hazardous conditions. So the issue around the housing crisis is one of the student demands for those who have currently taken over the student center at Howard University, which is called Blackburn, the Blackburn Center. But the issue of shared governance and the students having been kicked off the board of trustees positions along with the faculty and the alumni, that's one of their issues as well. A call for the board of trustees to reverse that decision. Now, that issue as one of the demands is not something, I guess, that is sexy enough for the media, right? That's a policy issue. The issue around mold is more appeasing. So that's kind of what caught a lot of mainstream media, I should say. It's important for people to know that the two things that I just mentioned are just two of the items. The other item, the demand issue that the students wanted and articulated, is that they wanted to meet with administrators. The students have been trying to meet with the president and university officials for quite some time. They were told that they were on the schedule, then it got rescheduled, and then they were told again, you're on the schedule, and it got rescheduled again. And that went on for a minute until the students realized, oh, so they're not serious about this. They're not going to meet with us. And they only wanted to have voice with the university president and officials, and were never granted that voice. And that's when they decided on Tuesday, October 12th. So we're talking about 2.5 weeks now. That's when they decided that they would take over again one of the student the student center at Howard University. Now, so that's 3 demands that I just outlined that the students articulated. Now they have added the issue of amnesty. And as you may know, student protest is not new to this entering class, is not new to HBCUs or Howard. It's not new to student protests on college campuses for a while now. And typically, well, let's just narrow it down to Howard. Some of your audience members might know that I was one of the co-leaders of the 1989 student takeover at Howard University, where we actually took over the administration building.
You know what? My bad. I didn't even include that in the intro. I completely forgot. My apologies.
No.
Thank you for reminding.
Okay. Yeah, so you see the tie-in, right? So 89, and I got to do this. Let me put up to the screen. I hope your audience can see the book that was done just in December 2019, which is the 30th. Here we go, the 30th anniversary of this particular protest that myself and Mayor Raz Baraka, that's his picture on the cover of the book. This book was released on NYU Press on the 30th anniversary year of the 1989 protests, where we took over the administration building. That's a whole nother story. Maybe that's another conversation. But my point.
Well, just quickly, I want to invite people to check out on somewhere on our channel. You'll find the video of a discussion I had with Professor Myers and Jelani Favors about his recent work on HBCUs as well. So anyway, everybody should just, after this, go find all of that. But anyway, sorry to cut you off. Go ahead.
No. I was coming full circle on this issue of amnesty. Pardon me. We received amnesty after we took over the A building. We were there for 3 days. Our call was to get Lee Atwater off of the board of trustees at Howard University.
Wow.
Lee Atwater was
First of all, let's stop right there. We got to let people know who.
Yes.
Yeah, I was going to say. I was like, wow.
We got to talk about it. We got to talk.
Absolutely.
Now he played a hell of a bass though, but and then you can fill in.
Oh wow.
Yeah, he was the head of the Republican Party at that time, and he was a racist white man. It's just no other way to say it. Look, his role in the Southern the architect of the Southern strategy, and just so many racist things. The Willie Horton issue, folks will remember. But we, when we found out that he was appointed to the highest decision-making entity at a Black university, given his history, his racism, and just how anti-Black he is or was. We all hell broke loose, and to cut it short, we shut down the university in protest of his appointment. And he eventually, like, we got what we wanted out of that one. He resigned from the board, and eventually the president of the university resigned. We never called for the current president at the time to resign from Howard, but the impact of what we had done was so much that he ended up resigning a couple of months later. If not remembering incorrectly. But the point is, just to circle back to the thing around amnesty, we received amnesty that was negotiated by our lawyer at the time, Donald Temple, native of Philly, based in DC with his law practice. But Sonia Sanchez,
I know him. He's also a programmer on WPFW, is it?
Absolutely, every Wednesday, Leftology, right? 8 to 10. Shameless plug for my mentor, Donald Temple. But he was our lawyer in 1989. We found out about him through Sonia Sanchez, who was my mentor at the time and who is still my mother figure and client and supporter of the students, may I also add. She was in my ear every day at me as a young woman co-leading this protest. And she advised us that you all need a lawyer. I know one, Donald Temple, he's got your back. He negotiated amnesty. There's a precedent for amnesty at the campus of Howard University is the point that I'm trying to make and show some continuity. Donald Temple was also the attorney that negotiated amnesty for the students in 2018 when they took over the A building just a couple of years ago. In 1968, the big protest at Howard University, the one that is really most famous for anyone involved in Black studies, you totally know the 1968 protests at Howard University. Those students received amnesty as well. And that's the grandfather and grandmother of takeovers on a HBCU campus, as your audience might know. So my point is to say there's a precedent for the president of the university to give amnesty to especially peaceful protests. All of the protests that I just mentioned have been peaceful. That the university is not looking to do that. That the university president currently in 2021 has not met with the students, but have only sent representatives. So meaning has not given ear really, discussion with the students is problematic. So my point is to say amnesty is the fourth thing that the students added in their demands. So I know that's a mouthful, but they are still there in the building. So now we're talking about 2.5 weeks that they have occupied the Student Center at Howard University. They recently issued a letter, I think it was yesterday, or no more than 48 hours ago, to essentially say our demands are not that demanding, that the university would not pay closer attention to this housing crisis is a problem. You know, that we can't even sit down and have a face-to-face after we were told that we could do so, and keep, we're brushed to the margins on a regular basis is a problem. So there have been many things, and Dr. Ball, I can facilitate if you'd like a student coming on because they can speak to this.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I can.
They're all welcome. Absolutely. And
yeah,
I would. Yeah, let's do that.
Well, actually,
because I've been doing media with Erica England, for example, one of the student protests, and part of the role that I've played, not just as a member of Howard Alumni United, but just as counselor, because we've done this activism work before. We can see a little bit further than what 18 or 19. I'm 53, and the protest that I co-led was 30 plus years ago. So we as alum have come together, the organization that I just mentioned, the Capstone Group, locked in arms with some of the faculty to add moral support, to let the students know that they are not wrong for doing what they're doing, to let them know that alumni and other, it's about Howard, and it's not, Like if you believe in progressive politics for Black people, then you can see that this issue is bigger than Howard. So that's our job, to show support. And we've been doing that. So that's the connection that I am affirming, so you can know that I can facilitate some of those
Oh no, I'm
conversations.
definitely down. But, the previous effort just didn't work. And we don't have endless resources to reach everybody. So I'm happy for that help and would love to do that. Because that before I forget, you mentioned something earlier that this speaks to. Did I hear correctly? You saying that the commercial media news attention that has been given to this has only been focused on the mold and the housing, as opposed to the representational issues with the board and all of it, and the more administrative issues. Did I hear you correctly say that?
If I said only, then I'm going to correct myself. I would say largely. I try not to speak terms. You know what I mean?
No, I probably did that. I did that.
No, but listen, I could have. So I want to be fair and say that it's largely been focused on that. When this protest made the news on Good Morning America last Saturday for a two-minute segment, showing what you just showed. The tents where the students are living outside the Blackburn Center. That was a Black eye. That bodes well for corporate media, right? That bodes well for mainstream media. And we're grateful, collectively, we're all grateful, because that's a gust of wind, that's needed to get this, to get this amplified. My point is only to say that, and this more, my God, you totally know this. And, there's a deeper issue beyond what meets the eye when you get the news from a corporate media site. You know what I mean? So that's why I'm happy to be here, to make sure that there's light given to some of the deeper issues that are just as important. I'm not here to say that unhealthy living conditions should be glossed over. Not at all. We're talking about, in a pandemic, we're talking about, your room being infested with mold. That's serious. I'm only here to say that the students were intelligent enough to argue for their physical well-being, right? Their physical health and wellness, in addition to, issues around policy and bringing their intellect to the table as well. I'm only here to say that their protest demands were well-rounded and wholesome, if you will, if that makes sense.
No, it does. And I'm glad Roland Martin got a tour, and I hope that helps.
What's
good for him.
I wanted you to speak to Corvius, this company Corvius, and its history and its role in this whole situation, because I think that's very important too, because that's one of the students' demands is getting rid of this company Corvius.
And just hold up, because Brother Kaba, as usual, all this training he's been doing is beating me to the punch. So let me just show here. That's not what I had wanted to show. The newly published article, and again, shout out to Ricky for putting this to my attention here at Hood Communist, the Neocolonial Collusion of HBCUs in the state, which does talk a little bit about the broader political context, obviously, and then and it's in the show notes already, the link that is, and this company that Brother Kaba is asking about. So yes, April, could you talk a little bit about this company and its relationship and its role here, the Corvius Group?
I can only talk a little bit about it, because when I got, before the document was made public, this is about an 11-page document. It was released on Twitter by Chuck Mondi. I might be messing up his last name, so forgive me.
Chuck Modiano. Yeah.
Yes. I had actually received that document from an anonymous source that morning, and had only read half of it, right? And could tell that the fact that the university had entered into this partnership with this organization, this corporation, was a problem. Next thing I know, a couple of hours, it was out and people got to that document faster than I did. So I had not fully read it, but know enough to know that a 40-year agreement with this particular corporation that is currently under investigation, I think by Senator Elizabeth Warren, that had been problematic on other HBCU campuses and military bases in terms of their lack of due diligence and just other things that I can't speak to specifically. Well, you have that's a commentary on the relationship. I can share the actual document if you don't have it already. So
I
people
don't
can
have
see
it.
themselves. I'll send it to you, and you can,
Sure. No, this is an analysis published at hoodcommunist.
Yes.
.org, and the link is in the show notes to this show already. But
Mhm.
just these quick highlights. The Corvius Group is a real estate company that develops and manages on-base military housing for the U.S. government. And skipping down here a little bit, Corvius extracts the equity in the universities that has Howard University's real estate holding through a 40-year contract that funnels student housing fees to Corvius and pays them to maintain other campus facilities. The cost per housing at Howard is $9,432. Howard students living on campus are paying $786 a month in a highly gentrified city where the average cost of rent is $2,160 monthly. The students are being forced into subpar living conditions with no viable options. So it sounds to me, upon just looking at that, it just sounds to me, it's like reminiscent of the whole Halliburton, privatize the federal government, privatize everything. The companies, these private companies can do better than the federal government at feeding and clothing and housing. And yet, oddly enough,
and there's several
voila.
several lawsuits against them.
Yes.
Including from many of those military family people that live in the military house. And you and I both know, Jared, military housing, the condition of that. So yeah.
No, I'm sorry. I'm listening.
No, I'm just saying. So they have these lawsuits that are being filed against them, and they're taking public monies. Just like to your point, they're taking. It's a private company. They're taking public monies all over the country. And then they're giving substandard, not less than substandard. I mean, like dangerous, responsible for dangerous living conditions. They're not even fixing it. They're basically like a slumlord. It's basically, but they're getting public funds.
Right. And I think the larger thing here is that the university would enter into partnerships is not the problem, right? That the university would enter into partnerships where there's a lack of due diligence and the partner doesn't center student needs. And there's apparently no appropriate oversight where the university would push for the health and the wealth of the students is the problem. So my question would be, like, what is the criteria for partnership, right? And here's what's come up a lot in the alumni circles, because we remember a Howard that the current 18 and 19 and 20-year-olds don't. There was a time, I entered Howard in 1986 and I graduated in 91. And there was a time when the cafeteria was run by Howard University employees, when the residence halls and the dorms were run by Howard University employees, where all of the student services were run by Black folks who had a connection, a real connection with the students. But now the cafeteria is run by Sodexo and all of these corporations. So we go from one-on-one contact with people who can relate to our experiences, which is why we came to a HBCU in the first place, to now all of these services being contracted and subcontracted by people who don't have that, by and large, don't have that I was about to say sentimentality, that sensibility, the contextualization of what it means to be Black in the first place. The connection is exactly. And Howard is, when I was there, like, we protested for more than just Lee Atwater to get off the board. The way that we were treated as students was subpar. And this is the thing that makes this so complex, right? Because we get asked this all the time. Why are you bad mouthing the university? Why are you not? Why are you airing your dirty laundry? I've been asked that question for 30 plus years,
Because
and
you
it's
can't breathe. You can't breathe in the room, so you got to air it. You got to air the room.
That is such a damaging and nasty internal struggle and relationship, because first of all, what people often forget is, or don't realize, is that before you've heard anything, and I don't know specifics of this case, but I know from many others, before anybody's out there in a tent, they have already done all of that. They've sent emails and pictures and asked and sent phone calls and said, can we talk about this? Can
nicely.
you this? Can you fix it? Nicely. That's what I'm saying.
Yes, and
after all of the rejection, they finally come out there. You talk about, why are you airing the dirty laundry? Why are you talking bad about our institutions? It's ridiculous.
I would agree. And Sonia Sanchez, as my mentor and the guiding wisdom in my ear, she was the one that gave me the language that released all of that anxiety when faced with that question. And she said, April, when people ask you all that, tell them it's because you love Howard and you demand better in terms of your relationship. We love Black spaces. We love Black institutions. We love Howard and whatever other HBCU. And so we have a responsibility to hold it accountable, to make sure that it advances and evolves, and that it, self-critique is a real thing. It's a necessary thing if we're going to evolve, if our relationships are going to be healthy. And, that she gave me the language and the context. And that's why the name of the book, We Are Worth Fighting For, came from something that I used to say all the time, as one of the many architects of that protest in '89. We are worth fighting for. And to your point, Jared, the ways in which we do it are varied. There's some people who will never be involved in a takeover, right? They're not going to put their bodies on the line, but they will go ahead and do all the other things behind the scenes that are necessary to sustain our activism work, but you'll never see their faces. They're not going to ever do a media interview, but they'll hold up in other ways. So my point is to say that we don't enjoy fighting. We don't enjoy take the work that it takes and the personal sacrifice that is necessary for us to hold the university accountable, or our Black spaces accountable. We would rather there be a humane, honest relationship. And here's the thing that I think is important. Howard, in the same way that anybody who was at Howard would tell you that oftentimes the relationship was an abusive one with the administration, meaning being ignored, the financial aid line, the lines for financial aid, the hardship that
that's
it takes.
That's HBCU, April. That's
right. Okay.
HBCU.
So, right. But so a lot of people say that it's an abusive relationship, right?
It is.
But then at the same time, all of us can always talk about that auntie that helps us to get registered in class, that auntie, that uncle, that papa that makes sure that they are running interference for us, as we try to navigate the university system. So we all have both stories, right? That professor that will not fail us and or ask, is everything okay, when they realize that you miss a couple of classes, and then you have those professors who don't give a damn about any of that. But by and large, we come to a HBCU because we live in a society where so many things are against us, and we need a space where people can relate to that, and then we excel, and then we soar. So it is a complicated relationship, and I don't want to paint the picture that is all negative, because it's not. But
I want to.
Yes.
I want to jump in real quick, just on that point, to make a point to you. I went to another HBCU. I won't say which one because I don't want to start nothing. All right.
Oh, Lord.
I don't want to start nothing.
April.
April. I don't want to start nothing. Don't start nothing. Don't start. Hey, don't start nothing. Won't be nothing, April. Okay.
You started it. You started it.
I didn't. I said I didn't want to start nothing.
Okay.
That's
All
what I
right.
First of all, neither one of you are dealing
Okay,
with Morgan State.
Jared, you're not
so
even
you're
in this
both a
conversation,
mess.
Jared, you're not even. You're not even. The Bears are not even in this conversation. But anyway,
But I'm listening to you, brother. I'm listening.
so I was overseas when I applied to my prestigious university, and I never got an acceptance letter. Me being 21 years old, starting after in the military, I would never even think about doing this now, which is just goes to show you something about a 21-year-old mind. But in my mind, I knew that I was accepted. I called them and they told me I was accepted. So when I don't have any paperwork, any acceptance letters, anything. So I show up there. I got my parents, I got my grandmother, I got my sister and her 2 children at the time. She's got 3 now, but she had 2 at the time. We drive from Florida to my university in Virginia, and I get there with no paperwork, and they're like, "What are you talking about? You don't have paperwork?" I don't have. I know I'm accepted. I just don't have the paperwork. Needless to say, long story short, without paperwork, without housing, without anything, I was able to talk to one of those aunties that you're talking about. Was able to get it, to get admitted, and I didn't have any place to stay. Just so happens that this woman had a big house and she had a spare room for rent that I was able to rent. And I was able to stay off campus because, usually most people don't know that in HBCUs, you can't really stay off campus like your first 2 years. I don't know how it is now. That's how it was then, unless you were like prior military or like an older student, which I was prior military. So I was able to do that. So I was able to stay off campus at her place. I had a car. And so, because of that, so that's the kind of thing that you get in HBCUs that I know it would not have happened, at least not likely at a PWI. So I just wanted to just kind of underline that point that you were making and why we do love those places, even though we have these kind of contentious relationships at times with them.
Absolutely. That's an amazing story. That's an amazing story. And just when I entered in '86, it was the policy you had to live on campus, but they had run out of campus. I never lived on campus. I always lived off campus dorm. Eaton Towers, downtown DC, was my first experience at Howard because there was no more room in the quad, which is where freshman women were supposed to be. So I can relate to living off campus. I always lived in dorms, but never on campus dorms. So yeah, but that's an amazing story.
So April, I wanted to ask, where is the Pulitzer Prize winning Nicole Hannah Jones and the superstar Ta-Nehisi Coates and Mrs. Huxtable, Felicia Rashad? Like, where are all of these folks being now present at Howard? Does that change anything? Apparently not for the students, but are they somehow involved? Have they spoken up? Are they being, because we heard a lot over the last year of them all coming to Howard, and the fanfare around that, and the Mecca. I'm just curious if they've been heard from at all in any of this.
I asked that question earlier this week. I don't know that they've said anything. I'm in the organization and myself, we're in daily communication with the student protesters. I've asked the student protesters if they've heard from, very specifically, in an objective, sterile way, have you heard from Anthony Anderson or Taraji P. Henson and Dean Rashad and who else? Who you mentioned?
Nicole
Kamala Harris.
Yes,
Kamala Harris. That's right.
Yeah, and even now, to be fair, that's not to say that. So they had not. Let me put it that way. As of this week, they had not. I think there's some people checking their social media feeds just to see if there's a retweet or whatever. And as far as I know, they have not said anything. I could be wrong. It is also. I wish. And Nick Cannon was the other person. I knew it was somebody that I had asked about.
Because his classes, his Nick Cannon's class, right, used to be taped there. Is it?
Well, now he's an alum. He's an alum.
Oh, Oh, I didn't
Yeah,
know. My bad. My
yeah.
apologies.
No, he's an alum, and so and Dean Richard is an alum. As we know as well, she's not just the dean. I hear that she's active on campus in her role. Um, but I don't know. It could be, in all fairness, they could be trying to figure out to get both sides of the story. They might be in communication with the president and administrators. They could really be advocating in silence on behalf of the students. That would be lovely if they were. We just, as of today, I don't have any word from the protest leaders that there's been any engagement from them publicly or even privately with the students. Maybe they're advocating and telling the president, give the students amnesty, step up your game with housing, reconsider. They could be, but publicly it has not come forth. I can only say in 1989, just to give you the difference, and again, that's 30 plus years ago. The reason I know Sonia Sanchez is because her son and I were in the same English class. And I couldn't believe that I was sitting there next to the son of a Sonia Sanchez. So that's how I met her. He was the one that told his mom about the protests. And we immediately began, no, that it was before then. But she and I had a relationship, and she got on the phone and called everybody and told them, you better get your ass and say something about the students. So that was a pressure that activist woman like a Sonia Sanchez got on the phone. She called Amiri Baraka, which she didn't really need to, because Raz Baraka, now the mayor of Newark, she did that because that was his peer. That was her peer, pardon me. She called Jesse Jackson. She called Abernathy, and just all of these people in support of us. There was a level of activism that she helped to activate immediately. I don't even know if she knew all of the things that we were demanding. But what she did know is that Howard University had appointed this racist man as on the board of trustees. So I don't know what the celebrities are doing now. I don't know in what way. Maybe they gave money anonymously to the students, but it's just not public in the way that I'm used to. I do know, to shout out to Bernice King. She didn't waste no time retweeting her support.
The daughter of MLK.
I'm sorry. Yes, absolutely. Yes, Bernice King and her brother, Martin Luther King Jr. the third. They both were on Twitter immediately. I know some alumni.
What about Dexter? Not Dexter? Y'all just play it.
Yeah, but my point is to say that there are some people who immediately was like, I'm with you. Professor Brittany Cooper was one of them as well. Andrea Ritchie. These are some powerful users that I'm citing on social media because of their activist work, right? Andrea Ritchie, you might have had her on the show, or maybe we've talked about it. She wrote the book Invisible No More. She's Howard Law grad. Brittany Cooper.
No, but why was I just...
Do I have her book here? No, I was looking.
There's something caused her to be brought up. Anyway, I just went blank on why I thought we were.
You had her on the show.
I reach out to, no, I definitely didn't have her on the show. I wouldn't forget that.
Okay.
But I think that there was a anyway, there was an attempt. I don't know. There was something where we were crossing paths via email. Okay. I think. I don't know. I'm not really clear on what I'm saying. The name just popped up again, and I was like, wait a minute. Anyway, I wish.
I usually have her book on my desk. I'm looking for it, but I don't see it. But she's an activist, attorney, a researcher, a scholar, Howard Law, on the book Invisible No More, talking about police brutality against Black women. Brittany Cooper is an author and social justice activist as well. So I don't want to make it sound like we haven't had very powerful voices in our community that haven't said anything. I'm just talking about the names that I mentioned, right? Because unless you're a social justice activist on the field, you might not know who Andrea Ritchie is because she's not as famous as a Nick Cannon. You understand what I'm saying? So I would want for all of those people that I mentioned and more to come out publicly. They might be doing things privately, but there's nothing like a public endorsement on the site,
Oh
on the
yeah,
side of
absolutely.
what is right. And people have to calculate their risk. I understand it. Um, the students are doing the same, and their bodies are on the line, and they need moral support. We need more people to be properly informed and to understand that everything that comes from the university in terms of their public statements, and the president did issue a public statement recently, a couple of days ago, is not filled with the truth. I'm gonna give this example. When in 1989, the chatter was, and what made the news is that we were being financed, meaning the student leaders and the protesters, we were being financed by the Democratic Party, because it was inconceivable that we could be as organized as we were, that we moved so swiftly as we did. How could that possibly be, these 18 and 19 and 20-year-olds, were it not for the support and the financing and the prompting of the Democratic Party? Because you got to know it's the Democratic Party that wants Lee Atwater off the board. The students are not that bright. That
I
was
was
the
waiting to see reports that it was the Russians who had these current students out there,
but it's
like
this,
they were putting it.
it's those kind of shenanigans, and that's why I'm happy to join my fellow alum, so we can. This is a disinformation campaign that's happening right now. You know what I mean? And we got to set the record straight. But it's textbook, Jared and Brother Kaba. You know, it's textbook that the university would lie and attempt to criminalize the students and to tell the student newspaper, you better not publish that story. You know, silence your voice. And to punish the students. That's textbook, and we got to be the ones, because we lived through it just like our ancestors did. We got to tell the story and set it right, so people in the age of social media, disinformation spreads faster than the facts. We already know this.
So I know in the few minutes we have left, there were a couple other things we wanted to get to. So, but April or Kaba, if there was any last points about the Howard protests that you wanted to make, please do. But otherwise, I think there were a couple other things that April, I know we wanted to at least raise that you have been in. Or
in the chat, if I put it in the chat,
absolutely.
will that? Okay.
If you put it in, you can chat it directly or put it in the private chat, and I'll post it. Whatever is convenient.
Okay,
whichever works.
Okay, works. I got you. I'm with you.
I recently spoke with a young lady who's one of the protesters, Sister Autumn, and she was talking about, you know, just everything, and just kind of giving me an insider's perspective of how things unfolded, and also wanted to just talk about how we could help the young folks. I know that there are certain needs they have. I know Autumn mentioned that they need blankets and things like that to keep them warm. It seems like the food is taken care of. A lot of folks are helping out with the food, and then they also have a Cash App. I don't know if you wanted to share that, or if not, I can share it, April.
You can share it, because I don't know. There's an underscore in one. I don't want to put the wrong Cash App, and y'all sending people sending money to the wrong person. What I know, one of the things that they needed, they're good on the food, but hot meals, prepackaged hot meals, is something that was called for, and breakfast food. They're getting a lot of support. They're tremendously grateful to alum and other folks. But the breakfast foods, because a lot of them have morning classes, and so let's just say hot meals that are prepackaged. Let's just leave it at that. But they're appreciative, I know for a fact. And just really, really quickly before we switch, they would love for people to show up. They would love for supporters to physically be there if you are in the area, to come say hi, to come help watch over them. The police ran up on them a couple of days ago, and so now we have Black men, alumni who are going to campus to stand ground with them because the campus police were trying to physically remove them. So we're talking about confrontation. So if you're in the DC area and can get to campus and you are a supporter, then please go show your love if able. I know that was something that was specifically mentioned as well. Uh-oh, did I lose
Right
you
on.
all?
No,
Okay.
I'm right here.
Okay.
I was listening
Okay.
intently. Yeah. So we do encourage. I think Kaba just lost a light. That's all.
Okay.
But okay, good. Yeah, and definitely HowardAlumniUnited.org. And if we get and I haven't seen it in the chat, but if we get the Cash App,
Somebody
we'll
just put
post
it in
that
there.
as well. Somebody did.
Somebody,
Okay, good.
somebody
good,
just
good.
put it in there.
All right, right on, right on. And then of course, April, at any time, at any point that any of the students want to come on this platform, they're more than welcome. And we'll continue to try to follow this story as well. But April, I don't look. You're involved in. You're doing. You have a lot going on. So I know that there were a couple other things you wanted us to talk about before we get out of here, and I think something is related to. Honestly, I can't remember. Was it the anniversary of the hip hop conference? And then there was something, some new developments with Akila Worksongs, right? There was something else.
It's always a lot going on, so yeah. I would love to have a part 2. But we did talk about.
Definitely. That is. Well, I will. We can email immediately after the show and start setting that up. But you're always welcome here. Absolutely.
I appreciate it. The good part, there's some good news about Howard as well. As I don't know if people know, that's why we have this new website. I just sent it to you in the chat. The first hip hop conference at a college or university happened at Howard University in 1991. After the protests in '89, we went into student government. Black Neoforce, sorry, let me just say this properly, led the protests in 1989. We then were encouraged through membership and some of our supporters to run for student government, to be involved in an official entity on campus. And so I ran for president, and Raz Baraka, who is now Mayor Raz Baraka, we were elected into student government, which is the Howard University student government, which we call HUSA. It was part of the reason why we wanted to do that after the success of the '89 protests was so that we can have more resources. And one of the biggest things that we did was to pull together. This is during that era in hip hop. This was, we organized it in '90, but the first hip hop conference was in 1991, February 1991. And we were, if you remember hip hop during that time, there was a lot of debate around hip hop, the culture, and hip hop as commerce. And there was this cultural tug of war around the essence of hip hop and all of this commercialism that was emerging. And we had this was the brainchild of Abdul Haq Islam, who at the time was the vice president at Philadelphia International Records. So I know all of my music history buffs recognize these names. So that hip hop conference was produced by the student government, by Black Neoforce, the radical radical organization on campus that we were, and a couple of other entities. We meant to pull people together to talk about the nuts and bolts of hip hop, the importance of preserving it as a cultural movement. We meant to do that as a one-off. It actually ran for 6 years because it was so incredibly, phenomenally successful. And so much of what we take for granted right now in the culture came about not just because it was the students that did it, but we were able to get Heavy D, Sister Soldier was a big supporter. Dougie Fresh was really, Dougie Fresh is never not famous. But Chuck D, Tupac came to campus. All of these people who are legends now A lot of them, even before Fat Joe was on campus on a regular basis, and Queen Latifah and MC Light and Big Daddy Kane and Busta Rhymes, when he was still with Leaders of the New School, they hadn't I don't even know if they had dropped their first single, but the record label sent them all to campus because the idea that Howard would have a hip hop conference, it just blew people's mind. And the record companies at the time, which had a different space in the 90s than they do right now in terms of music culture, they were ecstatic at the idea of sending all of these groups and breaking groups, to a Black campus. I mean, that was a promotion's heaven. We're proud to say that the first time that Common ever performed outside of the city of Chicago was at our hip hop conference. This was when he was known as Common Sense. I remember being in the dorm listening to the tape that he sent to us, that his manager provided to us. And we were like, oh my God, who's this kid from Chicago? Yes, we have to have him at our showcase, because we had panels, we had workshops, we had artist showcases, we discussed the culture, we discussed what it meant to have a lawyer. How do you look for a lawyer? Like all of these things.
By the way, didn't he lose, speaking of lawyers, didn't he lose the rights to Common Sense to a white reggae band? Wasn't it that why he had to change his, to officially take Common as his name? Something like that.
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway,
Yeah,
sorry for that. Yeah.
No, I was trying to remember as you said it. But those of us who are, again, I'm a proud 53-year-old, right? So I know hip hop in a different way. And I remember when I remember that Busta Rhymes came from Leaders of the New School. I remember when Common was Common Sense. And I remember there was a time when Chubb Rock and KRS-One and people of the like it was totally fine for them to come from New York to DC with a student driver. We sent people, when we called for people to come, we sent cars for them. And the cars were student drivers, or we sent them Amtrak tickets, because they were so happy to come to campus and to be around Black folks. Because at the time, the only place where hip hop was being recognized as a gathering of artists was at Jack the Rapper. If you remember that music conference from back in the day. And that was
I just saw the second season
the
of the Wu series.
Exactly. Yeah,
right. I haven't caught that series yet.
Look, I don't know Wu's history well enough to get into the accuracy, but I gotta say I'm loving it. And when they break down how RZA puts the beats together, like that is just some
picking
of the
out
best,
the artists and all that. Yeah.
Wow.
That was great.
The best stuff I've seen with the technology and the editing. I mean, it's fantastic. Anyway, sorry about that. Go ahead.
No. You're making me want to hurry up and start my binging because that's in queue for me. I don't mean to be talking all over the place, but I'm trying to gather these nuggets to help people understand how important and groundbreaking and transformative this conference was. And another thing that's important to note, Vibe magazine even owes its existence to the conference, because Keith Clinkscales at the time, we were told that Quincy Jones had sent people to our conference because he was trying to think of whether or not he should start this magazine. And he wanted to get the pulse of young people. So he sent people to this conference to see this idea that I have. Is it going to be viable? This thing called Vibe magazine. Let me just
wasn't that supposed to be the Black source? Do I remember this right? Am I getting my magazines and timeline off? But wasn't that part of the impetus behind Vibe?
No.
But wasn't the purpose? No. Wasn't the purpose of Vibe supposed to be like a blacker version of the Source magazine, which folks might have forgotten was, white Harvard student created? But anyway, sorry. Go ahead.
No, you're right. The concept that it would, because it was presented, owned by Quincy Jones. But the stamp of approval that he got, like, okay, this will be a viable product that could do well. These young people are, got something here. Let me move forward. And then we had Vibe, so all those kinds of stories. I think it was Snoop who came to the conference one year before he was big. I mean, big as he is now, and asked the people to the participants to mind your business, because he had never. I don't know if it was Snoop or Pac. One of them came to campus to this conference and talked about the importance of minding your business and getting a checking account and having the right people around you, because there are perils if you don't. Like all of these things, for 6 years from 1991 to 1996 were housed at Howard. And so the point is, we celebrated the anniversary earlier this year in February 2021. A group called Power Move, who Young Guru is one of the members of Power Move, and your folks will know he's the engineer for Jay-Z, right? He got his start as a volunteer for our conference, and he was a DJ, and his career speaks volumes if you know the behind the scenes side of hip hop culture. It was him and Lance Williams and others from Power Move that said, we got to give y'all flowers while y'all are here. We're coming up to 30 years. Do we have your permission? Do we have your blessings to produce an event that celebrates and tells the story of what you all started, the launching pad for so many people's careers? And we said, yes, thank you. And that emerged as a series of panels that are now on the website that you put up. So that's what I wanted to promote. The website is a repository of information and some pictures, just celebrating the brilliance. And this is not an ego thing, but just the brilliance of young people. Like, this is the importance of wrapping our arms around the culture and young people. Like, it's groundbreaking work. And
wait, I'm sorry. Somebody, I just saw the comment put up. Biggie is a product of Howard's homecoming. What is the timeline? When? Oh, there's so many shows. I can't remember what were the years that Biggie, or what was that? Do you remember which year that was?
The conference was in 91. And the only reason I can timestamp this is because Biggie came when Biggie was Biggie Smalls. No, he wasn't Notorious B.I.G. He was Biggie Smalls, and he was an artist of Puffy, as everyone knows. Puffy brought him to the conference, and I'm sure it was the first conference where he performed at our artist showcase. Okay. So
that would have been 91.
Yeah, that would have been 91. And so that was before he even did a homecoming. I'm talking about some dungeon-like hole-in-the-wall club, which was one of the places of our artist showcases, because we just kept everything real. Like, it was hip-hop, you know what I mean? We weren't in any stadiums. And I remember, because I was the head of student government and had a leadership role with the conference, I was only in and out of the shows because I was putting out flyers. I was trying to get people registered. We had high school students who were coming to the conference. I'm doing all of this administrative work. So I'm in and out. I didn't get a chance to enjoy the shows, but I remember watching Biggie from the back of a room in between putting out flyers. And the next thing, I turned my head and everybody's conjured, like crowding around this guy who was noticeably shorter than me. And I was like, who's this guy? And it was Rakim, and I almost fell out. I was like, oh my God. Like, it was just a magical time. It was just a magical time. But I remember being in the space, seeing Big perform before he had all of the, the other names.
And what year was he at the homecoming, though? Because, like, I'm trying to.
I don't remember.
Because
whatever
he
saw in the song, right?
Yeah,
he put it in the song.
He put it in the song.
I don't
because I saw. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I'm listening to you. I'm sorry.
I'm just trying to think of. I'm trying to remember where I've been and where I saw who I've saw, and trying to make sure my memory is real. But I remember, like, for instance, we mentioned Wu. I saw Wu. All of them were at. I think that would have been 95. Like, because I remember the stage was so packed, I literally could not tell who had the mic. I couldn't find the person rhyming. Like, I was like, I hear you,
right?
but it's just a whole bunch of people on the stage. And Tribe was there, like the whole Tribe, and De La was at that shit. Like there was some great, like somewhere in that 91, 96, I saw. They may have all been at the same show. I can't even remember anymore. But I'm saying anyway. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I was just trying to figure out what.
Back in my day.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's what we're talking about.
That's what we sound like right now. They about to call us.
But that's what we're talking about.
And it's all love. Like, I think it's all good. I think the fact that you can't remember which big time artist you are is a testament to that. You know what I mean? So I'm not mad that you don't even, remember. And that's why we're trying to document some of this, because we can't say we love the culture and we only want to talk about now. Like, what part of the game is that? Like, if you love the culture for real, then you got to have an understanding about from where it was birthed. You got to pay homage to people that came before you. I'm so anti people who only want to focus on the present. You can't, it's just not, to me, we got to have we got to be present for sure. We got to be forward thinking. We got to think about our future and our children. And we got to pay homage to people who came before us. You know what I mean? I just wish people were more excited about being historians. So we could tell the story right.
Listen, April, I know I could, man, I wish I had nothing else.
We gotta have her back just to talk about
this. We will.
So if that's,
in fact, let's next Friday. We can do it right now. If you're free next Friday, come on back.
And can I bring some of the people from Cultural Initiative as well?
Bring everybody. Bring the Howard protesters. Wait. So today is what? Today is the 29th. So November 5th, Friday, November 5th is the April Silver edition of I Mix What I Like. She is going to produce the whole joint.
She's going to mix what she likes.
She's going to mix what she likes, and she's going to bring us Howard students.
I'm glad this is being recorded, because when I go off and I can say he said so. So when you see everything blowing up, listen. I'm telling you,
it on tape.
He might not remember. He might not remember like he can remember which one of the shows he saw. So you got a point there, April.
No, you are right. I do need help with the memory. It is a mess. But it's already written down. It's already documented. So next Friday, we'll be right back here. Start it right at 8:00 if you can, or shortly thereafter. And we can go the whole 2 hours of updates on Akila Worksongs and Howard protests and Howard homecomings and hip hop history.
That's so dope.
Let's do it all.
That's so dope, yo. I'm excited. I'm gonna see if I could get the whether they leave the building or not. We're gonna bring someone from the student protest, okay? Right?
Bring
that's
whoever.
Cool.
Absolutely, whoever.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. All right, it's done.
Whoever. It's done. It's a wrap. It's a wrap. We already got people thanking you and saying they love it.
I see. No, I'm excited.
Yeah. Well, listen. So April, thank you. I'm gonna wrap it here and go run out and enjoy this rainy day of other work that now has to take place now that I've been properly energized. So, April Silver, Brother Kaba, shout out to Professor Ryan from earlier and everybody in the chat.
And just real quick.
Yeah, go ahead, man. Go ahead,
you got to remember, real quick.
No, go ahead.
Just drawing the connection between what Ryan said and what April is saying. Is that when you talk about some of these contractors, they coming into Howard, these people are mostly non-union. The subcontractors that they bring in, non-union. So again, just kind of underscoring and kind of tying together. So I just wanted to point that out.
Perfect. Listen, thank you both. Thanks to Professor Ryan, everybody. Please have a great, safe weekend, everybody. Hit the like, share, subscribe, join button, all that good stuff. And like Fred Hampton used to say, peace, because we know you all willing to fight for it. So thanks, everybody. See you next time. And April next week for the special April edition of She Mix What She Like. I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.